Alabama at LSU. It's a rivalry that rings true to any real SEC fan or college football fan that's watched over the last 10, 15, 20 years, however long you really want to go back and look at it. Um, these teams at times have traded winning national championships, traded winning SEC championships over the last couple of decades. A couple of real storied teams. It's the Crimson Tide, it's the Tigers. It's a night game there in Death Valley. It's a big one. LSU is a 3-point underdog, Mason. They're an underdog at home at LSU at night. You don't see this very often. Over under is set at 58.5. This LSU team has been undefeated under Brian Kelly in games at night there in Death Valley, at which goes along with the trend that we've known for many and many years that it's very hard to win there in that time slot. No matter how good LSU is or bad LSU is, it's tough to win there. This game is going to have some offensive firepower, I do believe, Mason. The over under, as I said, set at 58.5. I think these two offenses are going to be able to eat in this one. This isn't historically the best defenses that we've seen for these two teams, and this game means a whole heck of a lot. LSU's got a couple of losses this season, one of which is not in the SEC, so they're still sitting fairly pretty as far as the SEC race goes. They do not own a tiebreaker over Texas A&M, which they lost to obviously. So A&M owns that tiebreaker there, but multi-way tie in the SEC. Maybe we'll bring that chart back up here in a minute as we've been looking at it throughout our live show here on First and Long. Let's jump into the offense first for Alabama, and we'll kind of we'll kind of go group by group here for each team, and just kind of our thoughts on this team as the seasons went on. And Alabama has lost a couple of games themselves, Mason, and it's put up or shut up time here for both of these teams, honestly. And I think that's what makes this one all the more interesting. Offensively, I feel like Alabama has taken a little bit of a step back from what we thought they were at the beginning of the season. There was a couple of games there where we saw Alabama, specifically against Wisconsin, who at the time we thought had a bit of a pulse on maybe defense, and Wisconsin has kind of looked better since at times, and then kind of looked bad at other times. But in that game, Alabama just absolutely went out to Wisconsin and tore them a new one, and looked really, really, really good. And then the first half of the Georgia game, Alabama came out and just ripped Georgia apart. I mean, in an embarrassing fashion, actually. And it really all started to kind of go downhill as that second half of that Georgia game went on. Georgia was able to move the football, score some points, and the pressure built, and the pressure built, and the pressure built. And Georgia goes ahead with a couple minutes left, and then Alabama is able to win that football game. But man, ever since that moment, it's been tumultuous to say the least. And there's been questions of culture issues. There's been questions of coaching philosophy with this personnel group that they've got here. I'm interested to see what Alabama shows up in this football game. Uh, LSU has been pretty bad against the pass this year, Mason. Defensively, we'll kind of go through their stats in a minute, but I think Alabama is going to have ability to be able to throw the football in this game some if the wide receivers are able to get on their game and get on the same page with Jalen Milroe. So I expect Alabama to score some points through the air and be able to hit some explosives, which they've been pretty decent at this season. Pass plays of 20 plus yards, they've got 32 of them. That's 32nd in the country, so not bad. The most disappointing thing for this offense, I think, overall, out of everything I've named here this season, is the lack of ability to run the football at times. And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me with the personnel that you've got on this team, and the offensive line that was returning here. When this offensive line is healthy, they're star-studded, and they haven't been able to run the football as good as what I thought they would, especially with a running quarterback. What have you thought about the Alabama offense this season, and kind of going into this matchup with LSU, who, we've talked about LSU as well defensively? I guess we can kind of flip back and forth. We don't have to stay on one slide. We've talked defensively about LSU this season and the improvements that we've seen. there are players that are in place to make plays. Whereas over the last couple of years, eh, not only were people not making plays, but they weren't even in position to make a play. And I feel like, whereas this LSU defense has still like missed tackles and they've been sloppy and they've given up yards in the pass game and in the run game at times, they've been marginally better, but marginally better doesn't do you a whole heck of a lot in the SEC, where there is some powerhouse defenses this year. LSU is still ranked in the bottom half pretty much of every category defensively in the SEC this season, and which therefore is the reason I think this one ends up being pretty high scoring. What are your thoughts, Alabama offensively against this LSU defense? Really, either group. Take it away.
Yeah, well, when you look at the Alabama offense, they're still a very explosive offense in the SEC, which gives me a little bit of pause going up against the defense for LSU. Look, this defense is 86 in the country in pass yards given up per game. Now, Alabama has struggled on offense in some cases, but they do a great job of getting the big plays when they need the big plays, and that's kind of my concern for this LSU defense. What are they going to give up on the back end? I still think that the secondary, although it is improved, they're not great, and the pass rush up front, I think a lot of their success has come against worse offenses. So while I do like the pieces up front and the pass rush that they've been able to provide for this defense, I think that going up against the Alabama offensive line, could be a little bit of an issue. The offensive line is definitely better suited in run blocking, which is surprising because they don't run the football. It seems like the offense for Alabama has not been playing to their strengths all that well. But how does LSU get the pressure on Jalen Milroe? This is an offensive line for Alabama that has given up a bunch of sacks, particularly to great defensive fronts. I look at South Carolina and the pressure that they were able to bring. Is LSU going to be able to play to a similar level and provide that pressure to help out the back end of this defense? That's a big question for me. I think that they've been better in the run game for the most part, but is better good enough in this football game to keep Alabama honest, to keep them kind of playing a balanced approach, or are they going to be able to run the football more effectively than they have in previous games? I'm still waiting for whatever reason. I'm still waiting for the Alabama offense to run the football better. It seemed like they were geared up for that going into this football season. They were going to run the football more and be really strong in that aspect, and it just hasn't come to fruition yet. They've been really relying on a freshman wide receiver who is extremely talented, but I think maybe a little bit too reliant on a guy like that. And now, if you know that Alabama is going to drop back and throw the ball a ton, also it allows you to bring more pass rush, and you're seeing teams get home on Alabama now. So I'm excited to see what LSU defense shows up. Do we see an LSU defense that plays like they did in the first half against Texas A&M, or do we see the defense that played like they did in the second half against Texas A&M, where they were worn out because the A&M offense was, or the LSU offense was turning the ball over. Garrett Nussmeier was turning the ball over a ton and giving short position to Texas A&M. But nonetheless, there were still some sloppy things there from that defense. So a lot more unknowns. I think having that extra bye week before this game gives Blake Baker probably the upper hand on defense. We've seen this defense get, for the most part, better and better all season long, minus the one bad half against Texas A&M. I feel like we could see another pretty strong outing from the LSU defense here. If Alabama's not getting the run game involved a little bit more, I feel like the advantage would go to LSU in this one.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I think you're probably right. Let's talk about this LSU offense, and we kind of grazed over it there. It's been really good in the passing game. The rush game has been a question, and every time I think that LSU figures out something as far as the rushing game, they end up going against the team that shuts it down for the most part, right? And Texas A&M did a good job of shutting that rush offense down for LSU, and it's been a weakness. There's no doubt about that. As good as this offensive line has been, they haven't been particularly great at jumping out into run blocking schemes and being able to road grade defenses or anything like that. So they're good in pass pro, haven't been that great in run protection. And this LSU offense is like Georgia's in the sense that, you don't need a 200-yard rushing day. I mean, everybody would love to be able to rush for 200, but that's not reality. You need to be able to run the ball efficiently, and the rushing efficiency for LSU has went down as the season has went on, down to 4.23 yards per carry, and that's only good for 78th in the country. And you got to be closer to 5 for the season, because you got to remember those season numbers. I mean, that's including the mom and pops that you played, the popcorn states, so you need to be a little closer to 5 to really be considered efficient rushing the football, and LSU hasn't been able to do that. And that's the last piece for this offense. I mean, let's just be honest. If they had a rush attack that they could rely on, and I know that some of that's due to injury and attrition and things like that in that running back room, but Durham needs to come out here and be able to establish some type of run game for this offense. And I think that that's possible, as Alabama has not been particularly great against the run, which is surprising. And we'll talk about, and we can come back to the LSU offense, but let's talk about that defense. This is kind of just a brain scramble to me, Mason, because we looked at this defense in the offseason and we said, good, not great defensive line, great linebacker room, and extremely inexperienced secondary. That's what we said in the preseason. And then I come back and I do the stats this week and I start looking, and this secondary has been what's kept this defense out of the fire. This
Mm-hmm.
secondary going out and getting interceptions, and I believe it's 12 interceptions so far this year of their 18 turnovers for us, which is good for 6 in the country, by the way. This secondary has bailed this defense out, and they are young. And now, you've got the USC transfer there. You've got Malachi Moore, who's the player coach of this team, right? Deontay Lawson, number 32, is pictured there on your screen. He has been the leading tackler for this team at the linebacker position this season. So no, he's not in the secondary, but you get my point. It's been a surprising result put on the field, I guess. Final product put on the field for this defense so far this season. Um, just not what we're necessarily used to seeing from Alabama, I guess, from Alabama standards as far as stopping the run and things like that. But they figured out ways to make it up in other aspects. And you got to tip your cap to Kane Womack, who I feel like has done a pretty good job. Opponent pass plays of 20 plus yards, only allowed 19 of those this season. So that's going to come into handy in this game. And I'm really interested to see, with Garrett Nussmeier kind of hitting the skid in that last game in that second half, what is his momentum like? Is he going to have a shooter's mentality of, let me forget about that and come back out here and keep shooting, keep shooting the ball here, to use a basketball reference? Or is this Alabama secondary going to continue to do what they've done this season and take the ball away from teams that try to go over the top of them? So that'll be really interesting, in my opinion, to see, because this Alabama secondary, they've let receivers run open. It's not like they've shut down the pass game, but it's almost like they let you play into a trap eventually, and then catch you in the trap. So been interesting to watch. I'm interested to see how that plays out against this LSU offense that I think is really, really good. What do you think about that matchup in this game?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I'm concerned about Nussmeier. He's been turning the ball over through the air at quite an alarming rate, similar to Carson Beck. Even they're 111th in the country in interceptions given up, and Alabama is 14th in the country at getting interceptions. So that's that is a matchup to watch for sure in this football game. I think that this is one aspect that, excuse me, if LSU could tighten up, I think it could win them this football game. However, if they continue to unravel and continue to turn the ball over, I think that it could be one of those padlock stats that Alabama ends up winning the football game on. Can you win? Can you win the turnover battle in this football game if you're LSU? I think that I would lean to Alabama in that aspect, and that would certainly hurt their cases here. But also, on Alabama and their defense, I do feel like as really as poor from a total season standpoint. If you look at the stats from the entire season for Alabama up front on defense, it hasn't been great. It hasn't been a good run stopping defense or anything like that. I do think that they played. They played lights out against Missouri, and I understand Missouri's offense is pretty bad, and they're not great up front on the offensive line. But I saw some good things from those playmakers that we expected to see a lot out of in this football game, or for this football team in Alabama. And so I do think between that and doing some nice things up front against Tennessee, getting another bye week for that unit up front, I think really helps them out. And I'm anxious to see if they continue to play better up front, because even though we know that LSU hasn't been running the football all that well, we've also seen Caden Durham have sort of a boomer bust kind of mentality, I guess, going into these games, and potential there to boom on some plays and get some big chunk plays and some yardage in the running game. What do we see out of that? What does that matchup look like? If LSU runs for 150 plus in this game, I think that could be enough to win it if Nussmeier is protecting the football and they're able to win the turnover battle as well. I'm just really concerned with his headspace in this football game after all the turnovers, after he has to feel like he lost the football game for them against Texas A&M. What is his headspace like going into this football game? Because I know that the mentality for the secondary of Alabama is to go out and eat, and that they're ball hawks, man. They're a young group, but they're very talented. They got a little bit of experience with Malachi Moore and a transfer, but this is a unit that can absolutely disrupt a football game and get turnovers. They're pretty special when it comes to locating the football in the air and making plays.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Let's get into our predictions for this one. It's hard for me to bet against LSU at home at night, man. I mean, this is just what Alabama hasn't proven to me enough this season. Now, as you said, I'm a little bit worried about what we see from this offense, from LSU in this game. We see quarterbacks go on skids all the time, man. I mean, it does happen pretty much every year to just about every quarterback at some point. Can he get up off the ground, pick himself up and dust himself off and be able to go out there like nothing happened? I think that's the mentality that he's going to have because this entire offense, we've talked about it with Georgia. It's the same for LSU. The entire offense is on Garrett Nussmeier's shoulders, right? It all runs through him and his ability to spread that ball around and that offensive line to protect him enough to do so. I think the offensive line is going to be able. I think they're going to be fine in this one as far as being able to get him protected and everything. But we'll see what his headspace is like. Give me LSU, man. I do think that this is going to be more of a higher scoring football game. I could see the offenses really kind of coming alive in the second half, maybe, of this football game. I haven't seen Alabama make a lot of good halftime adjustments this season. So I think that LSU, I think schematically and maybe coaching wise, they may have an advantage in this one as far as getting into halftime and being able to make some adjustments. Now we saw LSU come out in the second half of the Texas A&M game and got out coached. But I think LSU's got a chance to be able to if they can keep everything intact in that first half, go into halftime, come out in the second half, and be able to run their program offensively on this Alabama defense there at home. So tough to go into Death Valley and win. Give me LSU +3. Probably not actually going to bet my actual hard-earned dollars on this game. I just think there's too many possible outcomes here. I think I'm more interested in the over/under, but I want to dissect that number a little bit more and kind of play this one out in my head and see how I feel like it's going to play out score-wise as the week goes on. But what's your thoughts on this one? What's your predictions? I like LSU at home.
Yeah, I think I'm going to lean more into the fact that Nussmeier is prone to making mistakes, and Alabama is really good at capitalizing on those mistakes. I'm going to go with Alabama in this game, and I know it's Death Valley. It's a night game. It's the toughest place to win in, but at some point somebody's got to do it, right? And I like the position that Alabama is in right now. And I really feel like they're going to win the turnover battle. And when you're Nussmeier and you don't have a running game to rely on, what's your next best option in the passing game? It's going to be your tight end. Well, this tight end, Mason Taylor, who I love, I think he's one of the best in the country, can struggle against this linebacker group or against the nickel for Alabama. So I think that he's a little bit of a non-factor in this football game, and somebody that has been reliable in some big game situations. I do think it's going to be really close. This could end up being an overtime type of game. But I'm going to go with the favorites here and fade the road dogs on this one. I think that the magic for Death Valley at night kind of runs a little bit thin in this one, and the Crimson Tide are able to get it done.